Good morning and welcome to Rising. We've got a great show for you today. What else? I am joined, of course, by Niall Stanage, my friend, and I don't know about you, but I am mentally already on vacation, yet physically I am here for another few hours at least.
Unlike you, I'm not about to go on vacation, but it is my last Rising day of the week, so I have some inkling of how you might be feeling. But before we get to that, Robby, what's on your radar?
Let's get to it. Well, Representative Thomas Massie has been in the news a lot lately for opposing U.S. involvement in Israel's war with Iran, believing that military action is something Congress needs to vote on, and for, in general, just being an American first patriot who sticks to his principles even when they conflict with what is politically expedient. This has put him in conflict with President Donald Trump recently, although I will note that Trump seems to have embraced diplomacy and peace rather than war and regime change as of late. He recently criticized both Israel and Iran for wanting conflict with each other, even dropping an F-bomb after the literal bombs the U.S. dropped on Iran. Sounds like he's singing Massie's tune, frankly, even though he has vowed to fund a primary challenge to the libertarian-leaning Republican congressman from Kentucky. Now, Massie, for his part, seems to welcome the challenge and is not muting his criticism of U.S. interventionism and also of the big, beautiful bill. Like Republican Senator Rand Paul, Massie thinks the bill is a bloated, big government mess that adds trillions of dollars to the deficit. And in a recent interview with podcaster Theo, he got to the heart of the real problem with the bill, which is that it's the everything bagel of federal legislation. Since there's so much to it, members of Congress feel like they can't vote against it. They'll be crucified for voting against the good parts of it. Listen to this.
Get rid of the giant bills, okay? The omnibus bills, the continuing resolutions, and even the big, beautiful bill. Why not put that on the floor one at a time?
I agree.
And then that way, you can go to your representative or your senators and say, why did you vote for that? Right now, they can say, well, Theo, I had to vote for it. I had a pay raise for soldiers, right? They literally will put a pay raise for soldiers in every freaking bill.
Massie continues.
You vote against it. You have to go back home and watch TV ads that say he voted against a pay raise for the soldiers.
Right. Even though he may have voted for 90 other amazing things on the bill, right?
Right.
And that was one thing that was tied in there, that if you went this way,
yeah,
it may have been like oxygen for grandmothers, right?
Literally, there probably is that in there.
But if you vote for oxygen for grandmothers, then they're not going to give. So I see what you're saying.
That really is the problem in a nutshell, and it's killing Congress and, relatedly, killing our democracy. Congress is supposed to be a deliberative legislative body that considers potential policies, regulations, spending packages, and then votes on them. What a world. When it all gets rolled into one, you lose the ability to have a debate about the merits of any individual provision of the bill. For instance, conservatives are currently debating a policy proposed by Republican Senator Mike Lee of Utah to sell off federal land for development. Now, some on the right support this because it would allow for more housing to be built, while others oppose it. But the point is this: when it was in the big, beautiful bill, almost nobody even knew about it. Now, the Senate parliamentarian has actually stripped it from the big, beautiful bill, stripped some other stuff as well, for reasons we don't need to get into right now. So it's actually getting some attention, the selling of land, discussion, and also debate on social media at least. But it's not being debated by Congress. I can tell you that. The everything bagel mode of governance has, unfortunately, paralyzed our democracy and the efficiency of our government. It also leads to endless growth of government, a real failure to constrain the deficit. I've said it a lot this week, so I'll say it one more time. It would be great for MAGA, great for America first, great for the entire country if members of Congress took their jobs a little bit more seriously, at least as seriously as Thomas Massie and Theo.
Interesting one, Robby. I know that you're a big fan of the congressman, who is, I think, in the House at least, the closest aligned to your libertarian principles. I take in the abstract the point that it would be better to have any provision that is to be voted on by the Congress sort of separated out. I think that would avoid the kind of concept that he's talking about, where you have to vote for a thing you don't like, otherwise you'll get negative ads about some other thing that everyone would agree to that you've then voted against. My question about it really is one more of practicality, because it seems to me that the problem right now is not that Congress is like passing too many laws or it's working at such breakneck speed. It's exactly the opposite, that Congress is seizing up quite a lot of the time. And if you then, even with good intentions, just vastly multiply the number of bills, I just imagine that that sort of sclerotic slowness will get even worse.
Well, maybe, but they're voting on things that they don't even know what's in the bills. The bills are these, omnibus bills that are so long, so many pages, that get passed at the last moment when the whole government's about to shut down. They don't even know what they're voting for. I mean, it's just an insane way to do government at all. I mean, that no other country is like this. At the last minute, has to cram through some piece of legislation they don't even understand. Yeah. It's so sad how broken it is. This whole land issue, which is heating up on the right. I don't know how familiar you are with it. I've become more aware of it in the last week because it is somewhat unpopular with many conservatives. I'm actually in mild support of it, although in some ways I don't think it goes far enough. It's an interesting one. This idea Mike Lee has. So much of the land, in the West is actually owned by the federal government. In Nevada, in Utah, Nevada it's like 80 or 90% of the whole state. Utah's like 60% of the whole state. And we don't want to sell up the national parks. Are going to remain the national parks. It doesn't include the national parks. It doesn't include land that can't be used for housing. There's so many veto points in the selling off. It's got to be approved by the community. It's got to be approved by the Secretary of the Interior. It's got to be, if the Chinese tried to buy the land, Trump could veto it. There's all different ways in which it's the most mild proposal of all time to create some more housing. And now we're debating it on social media. It was in this bill, and it had gotten no attention because it was just in a gazillion-page bill. Yep. The policy should obviously be voted on by itself, and now maybe it's going to because the Senate parliamentarian, which is kind of a weird thing anyway, that this person unelected gets to decide. Which Ryan Grimm used to, when he and I hosted Rising together years ago, he would complain to the end of time about
anti-Senate parliamentarian.
He hated the Senate parliamentarian. It was thwarting at the time the what was the other BBB bill? The Build Back Better.
Build Back Better, the Biden infrastructure, the massive Biden bill together. Yes. Yeah, I mean the Mike Lee thing. This proves your point in a way. I have not been following that debate particularly closely, but also Marjorie Taylor Greene, who I believe we're going to have on later today in Rising. She, correct me if I'm wrong, but hasn't she said that she would not have voted to support this bill had she known that the AI regulations or ban on state-level regulations were in it?
She might have. I have no idea what her view is on that.
But she certainly, I think, took the view that something that she was unhappy with relating to AI was in it at the time that she voted for it, and she didn't notice because it goes on forever. So
right. People who want to ram through unpopular pieces of legislation want it to be an everything bagel bill, so they don't look too closely at the details. Oh, it's going to do something you don't like. Oh, well, but it's part of the spending package that keeps the government operating, so we gotta pass it. Don't look too closely at those details. It just seems so obviously bad. I mean, no one is really defending this way of doing things. It's just the default given the political constraints we have.
Well, and also, I mean, it's tricky, right? Because sometimes in government, you have to do things that you know aren't going to be particularly popular. Sure. And naturally enough, elected officials of either party are going to want some sweetener or some way to defend that. So what is, normal or potentially useful kind of horse trading, and what is very devious, let's just slip this in the bill and not say anything about it.
It was a really interesting interview, the rest of the interview Massie did with Theo, by the way. Massie is a fascinating individual. His house, his property was like all built by him and is totally environmentally and energy-wise self-sufficient. Okay. And he talks a lot about that. It's interesting stuff. The guy lives off the grid. It's very interesting. Next up, President Trump got NATO countries to agree to up their spending, but there was one outlier. We'll discuss. President Trump finally got something he's been wanting since his first term in office, for NATO countries to agree to increase their military spending. Countries approved a plan to increase their defense spending from 2% to 5% of GDP. Spain notably did not agree, which prompted criticism from Trump.
Trump also committed to upholding Article 5 of the NATO treaty. Article 5 says that an attack on one NATO country is an attack on all, and as a result of that, every country must contribute to the collective defence. That's close to a 180 for Trump, who in the past has been very critical of the alliance, mused about leaving it, and has even called NATO countries freeloaders.
Here's Trump speaking with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte yesterday.
It's a great victory for everybody, I think, and we will be equalized very shortly, and that's the way it has to be. It's going to be a lot of money too, a lot of defense.
Trillions, actually.
Yeah, and we have a great relationship.
Others weren't as happy with the summit, however. According to the New York Times, the former Europe director for the National Security Council under President Biden, Tori Tausig, said all the big challenges were left off the agenda. There was no meaningful deliverable for Ukraine despite a fourth year of a land war in Europe.
Democratic Senator Chris Coons praised the summit and the NATO chief, writing in part on X, a strong transatlantic alliance is good for the U.S. and also the world, and we are bolstering our collective defense and confronting shared challenges from Russia to China. NATO's chief also went viral yesterday for appearing to refer to Trump as daddy. When discussing Trump's F-word tirade against Iran and Israel, Root told Trump, sometimes daddy needs to use strong language. Root insists he didn't call Trump daddy, but was trying to illustrate that he sometimes hears people in Europe asking him if the U.S. is staying in NATO. Root says that sounds like children asking dad if he was staying in the family, hence why he said it.
I don't know what I think about Daddygate. That seems a whole peculiar scenario.
I saw a lot of conversation about this on social media yesterday, so I wanted to mention it.
That's fine. I just think that it seems a lot of people have psychological issues in that respect.
Trump is the father figure of the nation, and the nation is the father figure for the world.
Robby,
and
contain yourself, please.
I cannot.
It's terrible.
But this seems like a very good outcome from my point of view to get other countries in NATO to contribute more to their defense. That has been a sticking point for Trump, and I think that's a sentiment among the American voters more generally on both sides of the aisle, frankly, that we cannot be the world policeman. We can't be solely responsible for the defense of the world, that Europe needs to contribute more to its defense if we're going to remain part of this alliance, and that strengthens the case for remaining in it. So people who want the U.S. to still be part of NATO, obviously there's a segment of the right and the left that thinks NATO has outlived its usefulness and is just antagonizing Russia at this point. Here's one way to keep the alliance going, have them contribute more. That seems like a win-win. It seems fine to me.
So in relation to the Jews themselves, I don't really disagree with that. There was the Jews that would that each nation was supposed to pay was something that the European nations had basically underpaid into. And so if Trump, in his sometimes somewhat belligerent way, actually encourages people to pay that money that they are due, then I don't...
It's a negotiating tactic. That's what Trump does. He's negotiating.
That would take us into a whole other discussion, Robby, which we'll get into about various other topics during this show. The point that I would say about European nations upping their defence spending generally is that is not, in fact, generally indicative of closeness with the US under Trump. It's in fact the reverse, where a lot of countries in Europe are now concerned that America will not live up to its historic or traditional role in Europe when it comes to protection. And so obviously Ukraine isn't a NATO member, and there's a whole debate about that.
And we've given hundreds of billions of dollars to help support them.
Indeed.
Anyway.
Indeed, under the previous president largely. And
supported
Trump,
by Republican.
Right, and supported by Republican senators. Now, Trump is, I think, obviously trying to change that in some fashion. And that is causing a lot of concern in Europe because there are NATO members in Eastern Europe who are worried about Russian aggression, Russian imperialism, really, and worry that the United States will not act as a bulwark against that in the way that they would have expected it to do in previous decades. Therefore, somewhere like Germany, aside from the NATO issue, is ramping up its defense spending generally.
I mean, it just seems proper to me that they should take a much larger role in providing for their own defense, that the Ukraine issue is primarily a European issue. I think Trump is trying to change the paradigm by actually bringing an end to the war. That's what he would like to do. He would like there to be no more spending necessary on Ukraine's defense because there's no longer a conflict. Now, it is proving extremely difficult to get an end to the conflict. I would argue that's because Russia is in such a strong position with respect to actually just winning the conflict outright that they have less incentive to negotiate. And then, this is a powerful sentiment among many American conservatives that if Europe is so reliant on us and wants help from us, then why do they mistreat, for instance, American tech companies in a variety of ways? The European Union is trying to strangle American social media companies in their countries with policies, restrictions, censorship, the kinds of things that J.D. Vance has complained about when he had dialogues with European leaders.
I think misleadingly so, but go ahead.
I don't think misleadingly so at all. How can you say misleadingly so? The European Union, with Thierry Breton, has declared war on the kind of free speech-centric ethos that pervades our social media companies. If you're going to try to, we can say, fine, if you're going to regulate us, if you're going to stop us from operating, our businesses operating, well then, good luck. Enjoy your own defense.
Nobody's stopping your businesses from operating, Robby. They are trying to create limits to the capacity for blatant misinformation to be shared that has, in genuine instances, started riots and put people in physical danger. That is a legitimate thing to do. Whether or not you agree with it or not from a libertarian perspective is a different question. But it is a legitimate argument to have, and it is not the destruction of social media companies to do that.
It's a legitimate thing for them to do. Why is it not a legitimate thing for us to say, okay, good? You can defend yourselves then.
I'm not saying it's illegitimate. I'm saying that the argument that is sometimes made by the isolationists here is that what happens in Europe isn't anything to do with us, doesn't affect the United States. If we are going to facilitate Russia to invade a sovereign neighbor and just accept that, oh, well, that's just tough.
They're going to be able to we're just not...
We aren't doing anything about it, which is effectively facilitating.
It's their problem. If they want us to do something,
though? That's my point.
If they want us to do something, then they need to play ball on these other issues. I mean, I think American. I'm not a full-on isolationist. I think American money and military can be used abroad, but then it has to serve our interests. So it's not. We're not going to use that on behalf of countries that don't respect the way we do business.
But I'm saying that it is in our interest to repel a Russian invasion of another nation. That is in America's interest.
I think it's primarily in the interest of our European friends, who I am glad to help to some degree. To be clear, I'm glad this is happening. I'm glad to help them, but we want nicer treatment of American businesses in Europe. And that's what we're going to get in return. And if they're not going to do that, then sorry, no more money.
Well, more freedom to stir up riots. Anyway.
Up next, Niall will deliver his notes on U.S. striking Iran's nuclear sites and if it's actually totally obliteration. We'll see you. Always exciting when we have a Niall's notes. Niall, what is in your notes today?
I shall tell you now, Robby, because it's roughly 4 days since the United States bombed Iran, and the fog of war keeps getting thicker. The latest, biggest storm is over just how much damage was incurred at Iran's uranium enrichment sites. An early assessment by the Defense Intelligence Agency, or DIA, is at the eye of the storm. The assessment is still classified. And that's understandable, but it's also not ideal for anyone trying to figure out who is telling the truth. The New York Times has reported that the DIA assessment suggests American strikes had set back Iran's nuclear program, quote, by only a few months. CNN made a similar claim, adding that the report indicated the strikes, quote, did not destroy the core components of the country's nuclear program. And the Associated Press said that the report, quote, contradicts statements from Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, end quote. Those statements included Trump's memorable assertion that Iran's nuclear program had been completely and fully obliterated. The Trump administration has reacted furiously to the media reports. Some of their pushback has involved the same old generic Trump world attacks on the media. But the more specific assertion from the administration seems to be that the DIA had also allowed for the possibility that maybe the damage was severe after all. And the Trump people say that this finding, more favourable to the president, has been left out of those media reports. Here's the president himself talking at the NATO summit in the Netherlands on Wednesday.
The document said it could be very severe damage, but they didn't take that. They said it could be limited or it could be very severe. They really didn't know, other than to say it could be limited or it could be very, very severe. And you didn't choose to put that.
But it wasn't as if Trump was exactly getting into all that many specifics himself. Take a look.
What intel reports do say that everything over there was obliterated?
Yeah, well, there are numerous of those reports, and they're coming out fast and furious. But the most respected ones we've already seen. And I will say that on a very confidential basis, they're looking at the reports, like numerous reports.
Trump has been backed up by other members of his administration. At a Pentagon news conference just moments ago, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said the strikes had been a resounding success. The previous day, CIA Director John Ratcliffe released a statement saying that a body of credible evidence indicates Iran's nuclear program has been severely damaged by the recent targeted strikes. And also on Wednesday, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard wrote on X that, quote, "New intelligence confirms what POTUS has stated numerous times. Iran's nuclear facilities have been destroyed." Gabbard provided no details of the nature of this new intelligence. So for now, who you believe will likely come down to who you trust, or maybe who you distrust. Trump supporters will contend the media are smearing him. Trump detractors will roll their eyes at vague but emphatic assertions from loyalists that he has been right all along. But this isn't only about Trump's veracity. After all, his propensity to make claims utterly untethered from the truth has been known for years. It isn't only about the military efficacy of the US strikes in isolation either. It's about the bigger question of the decision to involve the US directly in an assault on Iran begun by Israeli Prime Minister and accused war criminal Benjamin Netanyahu. The idea that the mission was a glorious success rests almost entirely on Trump's assertions of complete obliteration being proven true. That allows the president's supporters to make this case. The program has been destroyed, the Iranians have suffered severe damage, and the US has avoided getting sucked into a prolonged conflict. This thesis crucially posits that Tehran will draw the lessons Israel and the US want it to draw. Basically, that Iran has been bombed because of its nuclear program, so it should abandon that program for good. But it's quite possible the Iranians will draw precisely the opposite lesson, that they were bombed because Israel hates them, and because they had not produced a nuclear weapon fast enough to deter such an attack. After all, the US doesn't seriously entertain the possibility of preemptive strikes on adversaries like Russia and North Korea, despite the many appalling elements of the leadership of those countries. And that's in part because they do have nukes. And if Iran does want to sprint toward a nuclear weapon, well, if it moved its enriched uranium before getting hit by Trump's bombers, or if it has secret facilities we haven't uncovered, or if its bombed facilities could be back online within months, well, that's a huge problem. Look, there's plenty we still don't know here, but Trump's assertions of triumph look awfully premature. So, Robby, you buried with me on that one. What do you think?
Look, Robby, the journalist, certainly wants to know how successful the strikes on the Iranian nuclear capabilities were, and thinks that this is obviously needs to be investigated, and if the administration is misleading us or wrong about how successful the strikes are, we need to know. Robby Soave, the libertarian activist and the advocate for non-interventionism, wants to just say, no, they're all destroyed. We don't have to do this anymore. It's all good. It's handled. Stop.
Right.
But obviously, we need to know the truth. I agree with you largely that the danger in countries pursuing nuclear weapons is the run-up period when they're actually going after them. Like, not having nuclear weapons, just leaving everybody alone, safe. Pursuing nuclear weapons, very dangerous. Having them, so far, leads to stability for you and not being involved in military conflict, certainly not involved in nuclear military conflict. As you say, we're not going to take out the leadership of North Korea or Russia for that reason. So I understand why Iran wants one. I hope the lesson they draw from this is that with diplomacy and engagement with the West and that kind of thing, they don't need a nuclear weapon, and that they make us afraid that why they really want it is so they can attack Israel with it. Now, do I think that's what they're going to do? No, but I see their argument. I just hope cooler heads can prevail and we can go back to diplomacy, and we don't look too closely at whether we've actually obliterated the facility, because that's going to be a neocon desire that, well, the mission's not we got to go in and finish the job. That's not going to be a good thing.
Well, that's
not from my perspective or yours.
No, that part is true, but I don't think we want to get into the position of saying we don't want to know the truth because the truth could be helpful to people we don't like, right? Or to whom we don't agree with.
We got to have the truth, give it to us straight, Doc. We just got to know.
Exactly.
Regardless of what it is.
Right, and I think that goes to the risk that Trump took in this operation in the first place and what the reward is. Just to your point about the run-up period and all of that, we have spoken before about the other example of Libya. Now, Gaddafi was a terrible person, but he also did step back from apparently a WMD production or some sort of program that would have...
And we participated in his, not just ouster, but horrifying death anyway. That was one of the most catastrophic, I think, foreign policy blunders of our time. At least with Iraq, you could say, I mean, obviously many people knew better at the time, but whoopsies. Then we whoopsied again under very similar circumstances. Someone who was turning away from nuclear proliferation and was turning toward greater engagement with the West, and we still said, no, wipe him off the map.
Right, and
like
of course,
horrible mistake that was.
And Libya, of course, has been in pretty chaotic shape ever since. So I just worry sometimes that the American or even Western perspective in these things isn't shared at all in the countries in the Middle East, and so this idea that Iran is going to be brought to heel, I'm skeptical of that, and I'm concerned that, in fact, what is, I think, was genuinely intended to increase safety in that part of the world will, in fact, increase risk. In any event, is Joy Reid done with the Democratic Party? We'll discuss after this.
Ousted MSNBC host Joy Reid is barely hanging on with the Democratic Party. Those are her words, not mine. The lifelong bleeding heart Democrat went scorched earth on the current state of the party. She made these comments during a recent appearance on The Breakfast Club. Let's watch.
I've been a Democrat since I was old enough to vote, but I'm barely hanging on, honestly, because at this point, the party is not bigger than the future of my kids. Who cares what the party label is? Give me an effective fighter. If Jasmine Crockett is the most effective fighter, give me Jasmine Crockett. And I really don't care what you have to move around or who you have to disappoint in order to give me her. Just give me her.
Reid's support of Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett comes after the progressive firebrand lost a bid to become the top Democrat on the House Oversight Panel. That post instead went to California Representative Robert Garcia.
Social media users had a field day talking about Reid's comments. Alternative news account Breaking 911 writes, the Democrat Party is screwed when you lose Joy Reid. I mean, they're losing her, but it's not like she's joining the Republican Party, so that's always the catch here. She's, irritated that the Democratic Party doesn't fight more or is not progressive, or I would probably argue in her case, she is one of those commentators who would like the Democratic Party, I think it's not unfair to say this, to lean more into a kind of progressive cultural identity politics view of things that I've watched a lot of her commentary that, seems to motivate her. I think that's not a politically winning agenda for the Democratic Party. This is someone who said she was so, not exactly surprised, but dismayed that Kamala Harris could not win despite having, the support of, she was, listing off celebrities. Queen Latifah's even, got involved, and Queen Latifah never gets involved. That just seemed to be a kind of out of touchness. I'm saying this gently because I don't mean to beat up on her now that she's no longer has her gig at MSNBC, but
I don't.
An out of touchness, I think.
Yeah, I would be a defender of Joy Reid, certainly to a degree. I mean, I thought her show was good. I think it's a shame that she doesn't have it anymore. I don't agree with everything she says, of course.
I think it's a shame she doesn't have it anymore as well, because I enjoyed reacting to it.
Oh, well, we have different motivations for lamenting Joy's departure from the MSNBC lineup. On the point about identity politics, I mean, I think even within that, you have to fillet out certain things or different things within that umbrella or under that umbrella have different political appeals. And so Joy Reid, included in that interview with the Breakfast Club, was talking about her children growing up as black people in America right now and having some concerns about that. I don't think that that's an electorally losing argument or a bad argument for Democrats writ large to make. I think that is actually perfectly relevant. Where I think the electoral consequences of the identity stuff get more complicated are things like the trans issue, where I think there can be much more good faith differences as to what is fair and what is unfair, particularly things like trans people in sports. I do think you made an important point right off the top, which is Joy Reid may be hanging on with the Democratic Party, but because she is to the left of where they are, and she defended in that interview Karine Jean-Pierre, who you may remember, Karine's launching a book sometime soon, and she said that she now views herself as an independent. She didn't, I think it's pretty obvious, mean that she now regards herself as someone in the centre ground who thinks that Republicans have some good ideas. I assume, we'll have to ask her about this if we can when the book comes out, but I assume she means she is feels the label of Democrat can be too constraining.
Yes.
Or maybe that she feels that she's disappointed with the party in various ways.
My understanding of Karine Jean-Pierre's dropping out of the Democratic Party is, this is, I think, a pretty cynical move or tactical move to sell a book. And also that she doesn't, Karine Jean-Pierre doesn't want, she feels annoyed. I believe her perspective is that the Democratic Party betrayed Joe Biden, and that's why she doesn't like the Democratic Party, which is not a good sell, I don't think.
Well, I would want to have a longer conversation about that and exactly whether that is her sole issue of dissatisfaction with the Democratic Party, because she does think that, because that was, I think, written in the publicity material for the book. But it'll be interesting to see what the broader argument is. My point really is, whether it's Joy Reid or Karine Jean-Pierre or anyone else, the dissatisfaction with the Democratic Party shouldn't be mistaken for some softening of their opposition to the Republican Party or conservative beliefs. That's not what's happening here.
Yes, although if it means that fewer people to turn out to vote for Democrats, even if the Republican Party is not picking up those votes, if those votes are going to, I guess, the Green Party or just to no one, because they're like, well, I'm not going to bother to vote for these people, I don't like them, that is to the Republican Party's benefit, even if people are not coming into the fold.
I remember a former occupant of this chair would have different things to say about that, I think, but I actually happen to agree with you.
Yeah, well, and I think it's perfectly, it can be a valid use of your, I'm not disdaining this strategy. I think it's a perfectly valid use of your vote to withhold it. If even your party does not cater to you, then they're not going to get their vote. I'm a third-party voter. I voted Libertarian in every election of my lifetime. If the Democratic or Republican parties made a serious overture for my votes, it's conceivable I could vote for either of them. They don't really come anywhere near, so I don't vote for them. Immediately following the election, when Elon Musk was going to enter the government and it was all about Doge and cutting government spending, I said to myself, had I known this is what it was going to be like, I might very well have voted for Trump. Now but that was a brief period of time, and now we're getting back to tariff and immigration policies and even a Middle East policy to some degree that I don't like. I'm relieved I voted for libertarians.
Well, your moment in the Elon Musk-related sun has come to an end.
Yes, unfortunately. Next up on Rising, New York City mayoral candidate Zohran Mamdani is catching heat from both sides of the aisle after his primary victory. Stay tuned.
The impressive victory of socialist Zohran Mamdani in the New York City Democratic mayoral primary has prompted attacks from some on the right.
For instance, Turning Point USA founder Charlie Kirk wrote on X, 24 years ago, a group of Muslims killed 2,753 people on 9/11. Now, a Muslim socialist is on pace to run New York City. And Speaker Mike Johnson wrote, the victory of radical, self-avowed socialist Zohran Mamdani proves again this is what the Democrats stand for today. This is complete and total insanity.
Even some Democrats, however, aren't too fond of Mamdani. Congressman Tom Suozzi wrote Wednesday on X, I had serious concerns about Assemblyman Mamdani before yesterday, and that is one of the reasons I endorsed his opponent. Those concerns remain. Other Democrats, like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, praised Mamdani. The Congresswoman wrote on X, congratulations, Zohran Mamdani. Your dedication to an affordable, welcoming, and safe New York City, where working families can have a shot, has inspired people across the city. Billionaires and lobbyists poured millions against you and our public finance system, and you won.
Mamdani, a Democratic socialist, won 43.5% of first-place votes in New York's ranked choice voting system. New York Times data shows middle and high-income candidates voted for Mamdani by 10 and 13 points respectively over his opponents. Cuomo beat his opponents with lower-income voters by 13 points.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries both congratulated Mamdani, but they did not endorse him.
Yeah, so you're now seeing a lot of commentary from people on the right, very harshly anti-Mamdani. I think there was maybe more holding of the fire when it was, it was him versus Cuomo, because as my commentary makes clear, no one really likes Cuomo. Look, I don't, in my criticisms of Mamdani, I do think, Mamdani, excuse me, he is a very, I find his views dangerous and disturbing, not his religious views. It's that he's a socialist. It's not that he's Islamic. He's not an Islamic extremist, as far as I know. Now, I know some people feel differently about his views vis-a-vis Israel and Palestine, that they are extreme and that they're against the Jewish people and not just Israel. That's not really where I am in thinking that, but I know that's what where that's coming from. But I do think his socialist policies would be very bad. So I would not focus on the I don't see what 9/11 has to do with it. I mean, you can criticize someone's religion just as people would criticize a very Christian nationalist type person taking over any state. I see that criticism from the left as all, but I would be focused on the socialism aspect of it.
Yeah, I mean, I largely agree with that, except that I would put it in much stronger terms, because to me, some of this commentary from the right, including from prominent figures, is just a straight up encouragement toward bigotry and xenophobia and anti-immigrant sentiment. I mean, you have Matt Walsh, for example, a very well-known figure on the right, saying that it is, quote, a tragedy and a disgrace, unquote, that 40% of New York's population is foreign-born. It's not a tragedy and disgrace at all. It's one of the things that has historically made New York one of the best cities, one of the greatest cities in the world.
Right, specifically, where I think I disagree with him, he specifically says in that tweet that it's a shame that now it's 40% foreign. Well, 100 years ago it was also 40% foreign. It's the stopping place for people coming to this country. And this is something I criticize with my friends on the right a great deal, because I do see things differently than them on this issue. The idea that it is foreign people coming in, voting for socialism, is just not true. And you can see the demographics in Mamdani's victory. Cuomo was more supported by low-income people. The racial groups mixed. Black people went solidly for Cuomo. Hispanic and Asian people, I think, more so for Mamdani, but it's a mixed picture. But affluent, white, liberal people who have been in this country for hundreds of years, they supported Mamdani. There is socialism already in this country. I'm very against socialism. I think it's bad. I don't want it to spread. It's grown on our university campuses. It's not some foreign disease that is entering the country because we bring too many people in from the third world. A lot of the people who enter our country, especially from South America, hate socialism. They've fled socialism. If we're talking about from Mexico and from South America, many of them are more socially conservative, more Christian, more Catholic specifically, than the native-born population of the U.S. So I think this is a misguided criticism from Matt Walsh-type people. I've said it to him on social media many times. It's not because I disagree on the goal. I share the goal of thwarting socialism. I think they are misdiagnosing its roots as some foreign problem that if we shut our borders, we would have less of it. If we shut our borders and we had less people coming in, we would have more socialism, because the people here who are affluent are the ones who profess it.
Yeah, look, any ideology can be advocated for or rebutted, opposed, whether it's socialism, conservatism, liberalism, anything else. If people want to make an argument that Zoran Mamdani is too far to the left, by all means have at it. That isn't the argument that is being made by a lot of these people. And it's not just Matt Walsh. Laura Ingraham talked about the, quote, poisonous crop of immigration. Charlie Kirk, with that tweet that we read out, just a logically nonsensical tweet trying to somehow tie Mamdani to 9/11. Stephen Miller talking about New York City is a warning, the clearest warning yet of what happens to a society when it fails to control immigration. I mean, these are just outright bigoted positions, xenophobic nativist positions that would not have been expressed in mainstream American political debate even 10 years ago. And so I think it is one of the most worrying trends in American politics right now that you have well-known prominent figures acting as cheerleaders for nativism.
Well, I agree with you on the Charlie Kirk tweet. And I have criticized Stephen Miller a lot because I see policy very differently from him. I think if it was the case that we were bringing in tons of immigrants and that was causing, and they were all voting for policies that I thought were really bad, or like some expansion of the welfare state, or the most far-left policies of all, or overthrowing religion and free speech, I think I would not think it nativist to express opposition to that. I'm saying
but that's
that is not
on the basis
case.
of the policy, though. That's not on the basis of where Mamdani was born or where anyone else was born. You oppose the policy, which is fine.
Right, and I would be for less immigration if that was the case. What I'm saying is that is not the case, and people are misguided for focusing on that as the case. Immigrants are not a monolith anyway. There's a lot of assimilation in the second and third generations, and even in the first generation, there's a lot of contempt for these specific policies. It shows up, again, time to time. Wokeness is the preference of liberal arts graduates, not of immigrants pouring over any of our borders. Yeah. And I think conservatives often need a reality check on that.
Yeah. I again, broadly agree. I just think you used the term misguided. I would put it in much more vehement terms than that, because I think they're engaging in rhetoric that is just, well, it is bigoted by its nature. It is assuming or suggesting that a Muslim shouldn't be mayor of New York City. If the people of New York City vote for anyone of any religion, we don't do religious bars in this country, thankfully. And the idea that we should, or that there should be wariness on the basis of someone's religion, I think is very apathetic.
Yeah, I mean, a religion is a belief set. It is not a racial. You can have an opposition to a Christian or a Buddhist or a Islamic person.
Yes.
For a variety. I would not have any of that basis unless for some reason their religion compels them to favor some policy that I disagree with. Then I might say I don't want. Again, it wouldn't be specifically Islamic. It could be Christian. It could be Buddhist. It could be.
Yes, but in that instance, you would be objecting to an individual within that religion, right? What is happening with this rhetoric is suggesting that a Muslim axiomatically, by being Muslim, shouldn't be mayor, and we shouldn't. We just shouldn't entertain that stuff. Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling is taking fire once again for her views on transgender issues. We'll talk about that next.
Actor and star of HBO's The Last of Us, Pedro Pascal, taking a shot at Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling, accusing her of, quote, heinous loser behavior. The reason? Rowling's opinions about transgender issues. Now, this all started back in April after Rowling celebrated a court ruling that narrowly defined the term woman in Britain's Equality Act as a biological female. That prompted activists to call for boycott of future Harry Potter projects, and Pascal responded in part, awful, disgusting stuff, heinous loser behavior.
Pascal recently doubled down on that comment. In his interview with Vanity Fair, he said, quote, I want to protect the people I love, but it goes beyond that. Bullies make me sick. That quote was alluding to his younger sister Lux, who came out as transgender in 2021. Since then, both have been vocal advocates for the transgender community. The actor's older sister, Javiera Balmaceda, defended him in that same Vanity Fair article, telling the magazine, quote, it is heinous loser behavior. He said that as the older brother to someone saying that our little sister doesn't exist. Harry Potter stars Daniel Radcliffe, Emma Watson, and Rupert Grint, is it Grint or Grant, have also criticised Rowling for her anti-trans views.
Rupert Grint.
Is it?
Yes.
Okay. Great.
Yeah, and with the kids going after her, with that, I'm like, why would I? J.K. Rowling did for me what she did for those three. I would not say anything about her. And other actors in the cast have taken that standpoint. Look, Pedro Pascal can use his free speech to say whatever he wants. I think it was, kind of rude. And her opinion is not that trans people don't exist or shouldn't exist, just that she wants to protect the category of woman as somewhat separate for that trans women exist and deserve that. She's all for non-discrimination laws against them, but it's just a different category than women. The other thing about Pedro Pascal I really wanted to get into is I am over him. He's in way too much stuff. I loved him in Game of Thrones. He's one of my favorite scenes in season 4, the "I will be your champion" speech. I liked him in The Mandalorian a lot, although you never see him. He's in, or almost rarely see him. He's in everything. He's in every single thing. I'm sick of him. It's too much. We need a total shutdown of Pedro Pascal till we figure out what's going on. It's saturated in Pedro Pascal. He's in everything.
I like that your opposition to him is much more vigorous about oversaturation than it is about his views on J.K. Rowling. I am not as familiar as you are with his TV and film work.
If you've seen anything, he is in it.
Okay. Well,
I guarantee you.
I will take you at your
Our
word.
director was just telling me things that he's in that I wasn't even aware of. Buffy, what else did you say? The Good Wife, it's everything.
Okay, well,
anyway.
I mean, we don't like people being oversaturated. Look, J.K. Rowling is a topic when it comes to the trans issue that I'm always hesitant to talk about because people are so obsessed with her. Obviously, I know the general contours of her views, which is that she's extremely skeptical of the most pro-trans positions, and she's combative in the way she puts that. I have not seen her make comments that I think should make her be sort of driven from the public square. If people want to bring my attention to tweets that I've missed that do suggest that, okay. But this just seems like he's really having a very aggressive go at her for what isn't that much of a minority opinion. It's the British Supreme Court issued that ruling, and she basically said the ruling was right. So I don't know that it can even be dismissed as a fringe position.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also think he was just so bad in Wonder Woman 2. Which was one of my least favorite movies. It was terrible. He was the villain. He was terrible.
You really have a bit of a beat in your bonnet.
I turned on him, and I don't know why. I liked the first season of The Last of Us. I have not seen the second season yet. I know what happens. Maybe I'll do that on my long plane flight because I'm going to be on vacation for the next week. But you will be in good hands with Amber, Niall, maybe, and some other characters. That does it for us on Rising Live. Look out for more exclusive YouTube content coming your way today. And please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to The Hill's YouTube channel so you never miss any of our content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we're now available anywhere you listen to podcasts. I will see you week after next. Farewell.